So what we have today, I'll just give you a brief on how boring this session is going to be. That in the next 1.5 hours, we're going to talk some bit of, global stuff in terms of how world is growing and how does merchandising differ from what it used to happen in the past. And we're also going to get some numbers. Now, some of those typical mathematical numbers as something that can probably make things quite boring. And, that's why I'm emphasizing. But we'll try and keep you awake as much as possible. If somebody wants to sleep, just raise your hand or bang up. We don't have a buzzer like, entertainment ke liye kuch bhi karega. But I think we'll still try and keep you awake as much as possible. To begin with, we have a small clip. I hope you like it. I hope you've not seen it earlier. Even if you have, please don't say it. This talks about what India is and where India is poised to grow.
There are two Indias in this country. One India is training at the leash, eager to spring forth and live up to all the adjectives that the world has been recently shouting upon us. The other India is the leash. One India says, give me a chance and I'll prove myself. The other India says, prove yourself first and maybe then you'll have a choice. One India lives in the optimism of our hearts. The other India lacks in the skepticism of our minds. One India wants. The other India hopes. One India leads. The other India follows. These conversions are on the rise. With each passing day, more and more people from the other India are coming over to this side. And quietly, while the world is not looking, a pulsating, dynamic new India is emerging. An India whose faith in success is far greater than its fear of failure. An India that no longer boycotts foreign-made goods, but buys out the companies that make them instead. History is always a bad motorist. It rarely ever signals its intentions when it's taking a turn. This is that rarely ever moment. History is turning a page. For over half a century, our nation has sprung, stumbled, run, fallen, rolled over, got up and dusted herself, and cantered, sometimes lurched on. But now, in our 60th year as free nation, the ride has brought us to the edge of time's great precipice. And one India, a tall little voice in the back of the head, is looking down at the bottom of the road and hesitating. The other India is looking up at the sky and saying, it's time to fly.
Who better than Amitabh Bachchan saying this, for sure. And we do agree, and in some of the large seminars that I've attended, I think there's been a very, very common consensus that for India, in the textiles and apparel industry, it's actually a time to fly today. The next 2 or 3 years are going to be the biggest, probably, that India has seen in the growth of textile and apparel. And being a part of the textile apparel value chain, I feel really confident and really, really poised to meet up the challenges of that growth. To begin the presentation, we have, the way we have structured the overall presentation, we have a small note on the changing paradigms of the global apparel trade. We have how they are changing based on the evolving trade scenario. What are the steps to acquire and stay in business? How do you increase the bottom line? And how can you be the drivers of the increase of bottom line for the businesses? What is the role of industrial engineering? And how does industrial engineering be applied to product costing? So that's the larger contents, what we're going to talk about. If you look at the changing paradigms of the global apparel trade, the global apparel trade, which was in the range of about a $550 billion in 2007, poised to grow to about a $650 billion by 2010, will eventually grow to about $805 billion by 2015. which is an average annual CAGR, which is compounded annual growth rate of about 5%. Now, the sourcing is shifting increasingly towards Asia and the Mediterranean region. Now, what's happening typically, as we have all seen in the past, that approximately 50% of the global apparel trade would largely move out of Asia. And when I'm saying Asia, it's the Indian subcontinent, which is India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Cambodia, Vietnam, and also including probably the larger part of Asia. And approximately 50% of the Euro-EU exports, which today are inter-Euro, would really shift down and move into some of these Asian countries. If you look at the growth of exports between 2000 and 2009, in Asia, textiles has grown to about 9%, apparel grown by about 12%. If you look at Europe, the growth has been about 6%, and apparel about 9%, North America, textiles 2%, apparel minus 8%. But in terms of the percentage share of global exports that you see in the pie on the at one side of the slide, Asia today takes about 50%, America about 6%, Europe about 27%, and the rest of the world is about 17%. So fairly large numbers of the global apparel trade is what we're talking about in the space of Asia overall. And what's also happening over the past, and as we go on in some of the other slides, the way things have changed over a period of time in terms of the offering of the customer and the way they have changed at looking at the overall offering. I think what's important is speed and accuracy at one side, innovation at the other side, flexibility, extremely important, and flexibility can have various denominations. Flexibility can have denomination in terms of product capability, in terms of meeting various requirements of price points, meeting various requirements of timelines, and various kind of flexibility options that can possibly emerge in a retailer environment. Cost, as low as possible, everybody says that. Quality, as best as possible probably. And very lot of advanced methods. And when we say advanced methods, I talk of IT intervention, I talk of being closer to the customer, being closer to what the customer wants, and being able to adapt and change as much as the retailer wants you to. So buyers are focusing more on the consumer end. There is a lot of consumer proposition which is changing all over the world, and I'm sure people here would know and have also felt it over a period of time, that the consumer proposition, which was where the average order sizes used to be really large, today, while the consumer demands more and more change, the retailer has no option but to meet the demand of the consumer and reduce or change products on their shelves in the retail as fast as possible. Looking at also optimizing the sourcing cost, squeezing supply bases, and increased direct sourcing. Now, when we look at optimizing sourcing cost, obviously sourcing is a very big expense that a retailer has. And when you talk of optimizing sourcing cost, you talk of optimizing your overall cost of running a business. As all of these exporters or export houses that you work with are businesses, so is retail as a business globally. And when a retailer wants to optimize his cost, sourcing, which is a fairly large component of the overall cost, needs also to be rationalized. And that's where everybody keeps talking of reducing prices, everybody keeps talking of checking options on, maybe improving your YYs or improving your overall or markdown, or reducing your profits, and so on and so forth. Squeezing supply base, because if the retailer works with 300 or 400 different suppliers, obviously, if the retailer works with 300 to 400 different suppliers, there's a fairly large cost that the retailer has to apply. So if he works instead of those 300-400 suppliers, he starts working with maybe about 8-10 suppliers or maybe 30 suppliers. The amount of focus that a retailer needs to put in goes better from the retailer perspective. And that's why there's a lot of squeezing of supply base which is happening, which in turn, from a promoter, from an exporter perspective, it puts in pressure to increase the scale of business. Because on a certain volume, when the retailer squeezes the supply base, the scale of business needs to improve to meet that demand. Now, if the scale doesn't improve, you're not able to meet the demand, and the retailer would then typically look at doing the business with somebody else. And increase direct sourcing, because every middleman has a percentage that he takes. And while there is overall cost rationalization which is in the offer, the middlemen are the first one to be moved out. Now, what's emerging in this scenario is very typical options, wherein you have certain countries which get denominated as low-cost manufacturing countries, certain countries which get denominated for fashion and quality produce, certain countries where there's a lot of collaboration and where there's a complete solution offering required and also happening today, and then there is category specialization. Now, how do we define these? Can we define these? When we talk of category specialization, can we have an example? Or do we think, is India into any category specialization in any of the clusters today? Hand embroideries, high fashion probably. Yeah, so that's one kind of category specialization. The other category specialization, for example, which is the largest and most visible, is home textiles out of Pakistan. Now, Pakistan, for example, typically has a coarser cotton, and in a coarser cotton which is more suitable to produce, bed sheets and bed covers and home linen, that's become a category specialization on its own. And then there's knitwear. Now, is knitwear a category specialization anywhere? Do we see knitwear as a category specialization in any of the countries? Bangladesh, probably, exactly. I mean, the kind of cost Bangladesh offers today for knitwear, it's taken leaps and bounds in terms of category specialization. I mean, a polo shirt, which I was speaking to one of the retailers, European retailers, and somebody in Tirupur who was offering close to about a $3.84. People in Bangladesh were willing to do it at less than $2. And on the same quality, same product. So that's captured. They've captured the market pretty reasonably well in terms of cost. And knitwear is typically a category specialization which is happening in Bangladesh. When we talk of fashion quality, how do you specialize that? Fashion quality, one way is, as somebody said, India, for typical embroidery, handwork and kind of stuff. And there's a lot of these fashion quality specialization which is also which was typically in Turkey, which was a fast fashion, where you need to replenish your products really fast. And Turkey, probably, which could have offered a very small lead time, a very low lead time, became the base for that fast fashion products. So that's one kind of a fashion category specialization. So there are various possible options. And the idea of presenting this slide to all of you today is to make you understand that, the dynamics which are changing from a retailer perspective, there are various categories and there are various reasons why a particular customer would like to take products from one region or the other region. So while we keep doing what we are doing and we keep thinking that we are the best and this is what we've been doing in the past, so why doesn't somebody continue giving orders to us? There might be some other more compelling reason which is happening in your neighborhood which you're not even aware of. So I think that's where we need to understand the overall perspective in a far deeper sense, rather than just looking at what we've been doing in the past and being happy about it. Now, what's also happening today, for example, China, if you look at China, the costs are going up in China, both in terms of labor and energy. The raw material costs is also going up because the base costs have gone up. The incentives which the government has typically been giving to the apparel manufacturing has gone down. So apparel manufacturing is not typically a very lucrative business today in China. And a lot of people in apparel, while the textile base is still there and will continue to grow in China, or if not grow, at least retain on the scale that it has been till now, the apparel manufacturing is not looking as a very attractive proposition in China. With the result, some of those potential orders or some of those potential utilization of the factories is moving out. And while it's moving out, I think we've already seen some initial signs of those orders coming into India. And not just to India, going to probably India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and some of these Asian countries. What is also happening today is not just China. While we all keep talking of China because they are so big and large, there's a GSP which was always there in Sri Lanka is also phased out. And there is a lot of those Sri Lankan orders which were typically there. Sri Lanka does not have any textile industry of its own, so everything has to be imported. So if they were to do it without the GSP, the costs are fairly high. And some of those orders are also moving out of Sri Lanka. So the larger benefits that will be gained would be between India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and some of these countries. Are we ready to take that? Are we prepared enough from the merchandising perspective, because that's the front end, to really take that kind of potential, or take that kind of possibility of the orders which will be moving into India? Now that's a question which we need to address. And if we are not prepared, then what and how can we make ourselves prepare better? So we all agree that there are innumerable challenges. There are challenges in terms of consumer becoming more and more value conscious. There's a front-end retail consolidating which is happening, and the front-end retail consolidating also puts in pressure on the apparel back-end, because if the front-end consolidates, the back-end also needs to consolidate. And there are business complexities which have been increasing. Now, business complexity is increasing because smaller order quantities, low lead times, XYZ, all that we've been seeing and talking about. And price pressures, continuous. Almost every day when we try and book orders, we get, that there's a target price. Now, are you able to meet the target price? Are you not able to meet the target price? So that's a continuous thing. How low will the target get? We don't know. Maybe somebody comes up and say, I want to take something for free. But, probably the target prices are coming down and the price pressures are not going to go away. Not today, not tomorrow. They'll only continue to grow. And there are too many suppliers, there's too much capacity, and there's too much competition, which makes matter worse. Now, for the same product, if there are 30 different people, and not just in India, there are also people outside. As I told you about Bangladesh, why that order actually went to Bangladesh. That order didn't come to India or Tirupur. The polo T-shirt that I was talking, large retailer trying to source polo T-shirts and getting in Tirupur at about 3.8, and Bangladesh offering at less than $2. That entire, I think, 250,000 pieces went to Bangladesh. So there is tremendous amount of pressures that we are facing today in India. If we talk of change in dynamics, there is a mix of large volumes at one end and smaller value-added runs on the other end. There's a product pricing which has to be made more competitive. There are shorter lead times, and suppliers need to move to integrated solutions. And what is the evolved supplier today from a perspective of merchandising? An evolved supplier today would typically have control on the entire supply chain of the business. Even looking at demand forecasting, looking at giving solutions on product design and product development to customers. Build competencies on design skills, scale of operations, flexibility, and specialization. Now, these are 4 key words in terms of building competencies. And I think most of them, somewhere or the other, are related to the front-end operation, to largely the merchandising operation. In terms of design skills, scale of operations, well, not really, but flexibility and specialization on how and what we want to do to be able to generate these kind of competencies within our business is something which is becoming extremely important. Improve image by terms of social responsibility, ethical practices, and reach compliance, and whatever the world says in terms of not being compliant or having small issues here and there of compliance, India is still seen to be a fairly organized country as far as compliance goes at various stages of manufacturing. So I think we have already done a fair amount of job in social compliance and ethical practices in India. And even if something needs to be done, it's more in terms of fine-tuning and ensuring that there is continuity of those rather than doing it at some times and then not doing it at the other times. And think different, which is something extremely important and which is coming out more so relevant in today's scenario than any time in the past. Multi-location manufacturing, niche products, marketing and brand building. Now, when we talk of multi-location manufacturing, it's about, for example, having basic product supplies coming out of one country which is low on cost, having your specialized or fashion products coming out of the other country which can meet the shorter lead time requirement. And you can have various sourcing offices and various head offices. So why just restrict yourself into becoming something which is more India or which is more India-centric? I mean, there's a time today of being actually global in terms of your practices, in terms of your sourcing, in terms of your manufacturing capabilities, in terms of being closer to the customer, in terms of ensuring that your entire supply chain gets converted globally rather than just being focused only on India. Now, I'm sure all of you will say that, being an employee or working in a company, now these are certain things that an employee can't do too much. It's basically the owners or the promoters call to how multinational or how how to build these competencies, basically. All the competencies that I've told in the previous slide. I think, and why I have put it here specifically is that unless the merchandisers of an organization start understanding these competencies completely and start focusing on building some of them internally, I think that confidence in terms of moving on to the next level and next steps is entirely generated at this level, at the merchandising level, at all of your level. So unless that thing comes up, and unless we start getting, more and more, focused and more confident of adapting some of these or evolving some of these competencies into our manufacturing capabilities, the next steps would then look far-sighted. So I think that's why I have put these here in purpose, so that to let everybody know that this is how, and these are how the competencies which are going to be important in future. Now, one of the key things that I keep hearing from everybody and all promoters that we talk, now we work mostly at the promoter level, and I think everybody has issues that, at times, either the merchandising is not system oriented, merchandising is very person oriented. So you have great merchandisers in a factory and you have not so great merchandisers in the factory. And people say that it also becomes fashionable to probably, put in all faults that happened in manufacturing onto the merchandiser. And I think there's a lot of people who can take credit for it, but, eventually a lot of faults get put onto the merchandiser. So how do we come out of those, and what are the inherent systemic flaws that we can look at and that we can use as, practices within the merchandising function to ensure that, our overall system goes better? And, while we go on to some of the other modules that we have in this presentation, I must give an introduction there that although there's a bit of role of merchandising that all of you would be doing from the time you get your specs to the time you make your samples, to approvals, to maybe costings, to maybe, sourcing and, doing the entire realm of activities, and all of the merchandisers tend to become the most important people in the factory, which is right. I mean, you are, for that matter, because there's a fair amount of business which is being handled at your perspective. What's important also for you to understand that, that is only one part of the business. It's not something which goes into the entire supply chain. And unless there is control mechanisms and control put into the manufacturing, which should also be driven by merchandising, which should also be driven, not handled completely, but I'm saying driven by merchandising at least. That will ensure that whatever your overall objective was in terms of when you booked a particular style, you are able to meet the profitability of that style. And I'm using the word profitability here because ultimately that is the most important thing. If your shipments go on time, you don't end up spending on air freights. If you don't have too many rejections, your overall utilization becomes better. If your YYs are correct, you know how much fabric you've ordered and you don't end up spending more in buying more fabric. If your trims are utilized better or utilized adequately rather, then you don't have to spend more time or arranging more trims or buying more trims. So I think overall the supply chain, the overall component of supply chain control has to happen at a focal point, which is merchandising, and that has to be driven by you. You can't control everything, but you can at least drive it. So that is the idea with which we have taken some of the next modules within this presentation. Gautam.
Thanks, Amit. Good afternoon. What Amit said, and I'll take it forward from there. We need to understand the business dynamics. That's very important. And what we have been saying in the past slides, that the cost is going up, the cost of manufacturing is going up, the quality requirement from the buying end is going up. But on the other hand, what we see is drastically the FOB margins are coming down. The order quantities are becoming shorter, the lead times are shorter. Now, under this situation, how do we react? How do we prepare ourselves to move forward, to take the next leap? Now, the key factors to sustain this business is to have 100% delivery, on-time delivery. Every buyer demands that, and we are late for one day, they put some discount, they put late shipments, they make it CNFAir, and there are a lot of clauses that has been added in the contract. When we negotiate a order, they talk of 40 days lead time, they talk of 30 days lead time, and they don't even give you the color combos. And they say that, no, that's in the process. They keep decreasing the prices, and we also as a competitor decrease the prices to get the business. So it's a both end, you know. It's not only they who decrease the prices, it's as competitors, we are also decreasing our prices. If my competitor is quoting something, I'm decreasing some cents and I'm getting that order. We have to be, another thing that is very important is we need to be self-reliant suppliers, which always going to come in when we are going to be sustainable in quality to get our business in right perspective. And obviously the CSR is in place. Now, the need of hour, if you see what's happening 10 years back was, if you see the graph that was plotted on the traditional part, is that the buyer was involved more in the line concept, the product design, the product development, sourcing, and then when the material sourcing also, to some aspect, the buyers were involved. And the later stage, as agents and manufacturers, we were only there from the sample approval and to the further production. But now if you see today, in the changing stage, in the changing scenario, the manufacturer is there at the time of line concepts. We have to start our business from there. If we have to develop our suppliers, our buyers, we have to get involved from the line concept, from product design, development, and take it through the shipping part. So the model is now changing, and we, as quickly we act, we will be well self-sufficient. Now, having said that, how do we sustain this business? How do we first acquire this business, and then how do we sustain this business? This slide will explain what we need to do. We are talking of business orientation, and the first thing that in business orientation we need to talk of partnership. We are talk of partnering for the growth. The partnership is between both ends, back end and the front end. As a manufacturing, as a retailer who comes to us, we have to be the one-stop solution. We have to be their forecasting cell, we have to be their designing cell, we have to be their entire pre-production setup for them. We should be the manufacturing base for them, and we should be highly sufficient capabilities of handling their logistics. With linkages of IT and supply chain, we can really build in a relationship, a partner in terms of our in terms of our retailers. Now, in doing that, what is needed? The key areas of focus. We need to talk of product design. In today's competitive world, we have to be product designers, because India's business is totally based on product. We are not making those polos or basic tees where we have 2 million pieces order and we are just running it for 60 days. We have shorter styles, we have different styles. Our lines need to be flexible to produce them. One, after a polo, it has to be a fleece jacket, it can be a trouser, it can be a pajama. So we need to look at our product design from both ends, from the customer need end and from the production manufacturing end. So you all sitting here today in this room, merchandisers, who was the biggest link between these two ends, have to understand both the forays, what the customer wants and how well it can be produced in your factories. So this needs to be understood. Second is to analyze the capacities of your compliant units, because this becomes the biggest challenge when we take in orders and then we start outsourcing it because we don't have capacities in-house. How good do we have the fabric control? Because that is the major cost that covers the entire FOB of our product. What is the importance of right embellishment? Because sometimes when we do product costing, when we do negotiations, we accept certain things which later on creates a major problem in our manufacturing cycle. So we need to understand what is the right embellishment that is feasible in the production. And obviously the last, which is garment engineering. Now, what do we understand by product evolution? This slide speaks it all, right from cotton to a garment. We need to do a partnership across both the ends. That means we should go back. We should have our supplier partnership backward also with our mills, with our yarn suppliers, and we should evolve our product. If we have a control at the back end, our product will be right. We don't need to look at it. That we can assure. But the only thing is in India is that when we start sourcing yarns from 10 people, we get a fabric which has 100 shades. And then we start sorting it at the packing stage. So that's how it works out. But now in the changing forum, what we are trying to say is, if we have to do a product evolution, that's why we have used the word evolution. We have to draw a link between our product at the yarn stage, at the cotton stage, to the final end product. Second most important area that we need to focus is the design and the product innovation. Product innovation is the key word. Anything that interests your customer will get you the business. You have to generate that interest because you are the front end. Now, how do we do that? We have a lot of macro trends for season, micro trends for each segment. We do need to do trend forecastings. These things do happen, but they are not happening at a macro and a micro level in every export house. This is happening only to a certain level of design cells, which few of the export houses have, and I think more and more are getting into that concept of having their own design studios in the factory. And also we have to set up an extensive product development cell. If we are a shirt manufacturer, it doesn't say that we cannot manufacture denims. You know, we have to diversify. We have to have a product development cell. We have to come up within the same set of fabrics, different kind of product that is possible. Different type of mismatches, matching fabric, knits with denim, denim with leather, leather with cotton, anything that goes, anything that interests your customer, which will sell in Euro market, we have to develop that. Now the challenge that comes is that when we look at a design, how do we convert it into delivery? See, two words, very important, design into delivery. It's very easy to design on a piece of paper, very easy to create a sample, very easy to get a business or an order. But how do we convert that into delivery? There where the challenges comes in. How many of these can be produced on the shop floor? This one vital question before any negotiating any order, one merchandiser should ask him or herself, you know, is this production friendly? It can be made in the production or not. I have shown a figure of incorrect embellishment. Here, when we choose a wrong embellishment, we choose some kind of an handwork which is not possible. It can be possible on one piece, but when we have to make it in 10,000 pieces, we need to have that infrastructure backup, which is going to give us within that lead time. Question is that it cannot be made. It can be made. Definitely it can be made. But where is the timeline? And are we have that much timeline in our hands in the lead time? That is the question that needs to be resolved. And third, meeting the customer price bracket. We need to actually look inward to provide a good price. When we say inward, what we mean, we have to look at our wastages, because that is the price factor, which is the maximum, which goes into the drain. Sorry to use that word, but it goes into the drain because the wastage is a direct loss. It's a direct revenue loss to the company. Now, when it comes to fabric vendors, what is important? We need to choose the right fabric and the vendor. Both is important. The right fabric for production and the right vendor. We might be having 10 vendors, but we never evaluate our vendors. We never do trend forecasting with our vendors. A sample comes in, a swatch comes in, a lab dip comes in, a cutting comes in, we forward it to our mills and ask them to design or develop that design. But we never do trend forecasting. We never do color forecasting with our mills. Our mills are not equipped. Our mills, I'm sure you would throw this question to me that the mills are not equipped. There are very few, handful of them who are equipped in India to do this. But whose duty it is to educate them? If we have to grow in business, they have to also grow. They have to partner this growth. So there has to be a backward link on that. Second, which is important, is the evaluation of vendor, which I was saying. Understanding the lead time. Lead time is very important. As important it is for you, it is equally important for your partners who are doing your supply chain. Each supplier needs to understand the concept of lead time, the importance of lead time. Obviously, the price, nothing to say on that, and the quality of the product. That should be the main criteria, in more than the price and more than the lead time. Because you might negotiate on, a rupee extra on a meter of a fabric, but that rupee extra given can assure you certain shades which are within your acceptable limits, or there are certain areas which is acceptable by paying them a rupee extra. That can be negotiated on, and you can be assuring the quality on that end. When we talk of embellishment, we say using the right surface embellishment to minimize the rework. It might be a little boring for everybody, but I'm going it a little deeply into these things because these are directly connected to your back end and your front end. Closure of embroidery techniques, placements, and embroidery capacities. What we do as merchandisers, that we only close the embroidery technique or maybe the placement. We never talk of embroidery capacities. That is operational end. But if we are able to book our orders, looking at our embroidery capacities, whether it is in-house or whether it is out-house, we will able to deliver it better, or we would at least ensure it delivering it better. Identifying high lead time areas, high lead trims areas, which takes high lead time, like your trims which are basically imported, which takes 20 days, 25 days. How quickly it needs to be ordered, how quickly you need to have the lab dips in place to order them. Those areas need to be focused on. And obviously the TNA, the time and action calendar, which is a very key important factor. In today's scenario, how much or how little I know about exports in India, or especially in the northern India, TNA has been made, but that is more on the buyer end. It is not for the operational end. It is done just to show it to the buyer, to mail it to the buyer, not to follow it in the factory. If we do it back end, I think that will give us results. Now, how to increase the bottom line of our business? Amit, you can take it.
See, we have two things here. One is about certain amount of costs and certain amount of how, a particular business bottom line can be increased. And I think before actually getting into some numbers, I'll just try and throw a few questions to a couple of people here, and let's see how quickly we get those answers. I mean, if somebody was to tell me, if for example, the gentleman in the blue shirt was to tell me how many inches are there in a meter. Point? 39.37, right. If the lady in the yellow dress can tell me how many centimeters are there in an inch. Oh, we have so many ladies in the yellow dress. If somebody can tell me that guy in the floral shirt, or a nice printed shirt probably, how many zeros are there in 1 lakh? Easy. 5, good. If somebody can tell me how many minutes are there in an hour? How many hours do we work in a day? How many minutes are there in 8 hours? Yeah, so I know that people relatively are awake then. Thanks. Now, I use this because also...
what they told is that they work for 10 hours. Merchandiser cannot stop at 8 hours.
10 hours is also conservative today. 12 hours.
Merchandiser cannot stop at 8 hours.
No, I guess, well, I'm sure all of us are attuned to working longer hours. My basic idea of throwing these questions was that we are using some of these figures in some of the subsequent slides, and it'll become easier for you to get familiar as we go through it. Now we are saying that productivity performance measures, when you're talking about the key financial performance measures, first is the top line. Any P&L of a factory or a business anywhere in the world, the biggest thing is the sales, which is the top line of the business, the amount of sales or revenue that you have generated for a particular company. And the last line of the P&L is bottom line, which is called profits, right? We call it as EBITDA, which is earning before interest, tax and depreciation, which is largely operational profit, or we talk about PAT, which is profit after tax and interest, depreciation, all of this. So various denominations could be used, but two key financial performance of a factory or a business, top line and bottom line. And the other non-financial performance measures, as important, customer satisfaction. If the customer is not satisfied, he will never come back to you again. Compliance, very basic gross requirement today of business. If factories are not compliant, customer might not come to your factory to be evaluated. Quality, completely, without any compromise. Product has to have the required amount of quality that is required by the customer. Now, efficiency is something which is a key matrix, which some of us know, some of us don't know, on how does efficiency play a very important part in the overall financial performance of a company or an organization. And we have illustrated a few examples in the coming slides to let you know on how efficiency as a factor becomes such an important parameter in deciding the performance of a business. And on-time delivery, I mean, I can't say less. Obviously, if the delivery is on time, you don't spend up money on air freights, and your customer is happy, and you get your invoices on time and kind of stuff. Now, in this example that I've quoted some figures here. These are now apparel. This is a typical apparel example. If the overall FOB is $10, we have taken the raw material cost as $6 at roughly about 60%. Very illustrative. We've taken labor cost at 2% at $2, which is 20%. Overheads at $1.2, and profit at 0.8%, $0.8, which is about 8%. Now, very broad numbers here. Now, if you look at the top line sales revenues numbers, for example, you have number of machines if they're running at 100, and you have 25 days in a month. Your working minutes available per day is 480. The total available minutes is how much? How would you derive 12 lakhs here? That's basically number of machines, 100 into 25 into 480. So 100 machines working into 25 into 480 gives you a total of 12 lakhs minutes available that you can produce in a month. Now, if you were to produce at 100% efficiency, you would produce all 12 lakh minutes. But since you are not producing at 100% efficiency, you will not produce entire 12 lakh minutes. And if you're working at a 50% efficiency, your minutes produced will actually be 6 lakhs and not 12 lakhs. So your utilization in terms of orders or the capacity that you can generate will be only 6 lakh minutes. Now, in a 6 lakh minutes, if you're making a garment, which is a 40 minutes equivalent, if the garment takes 40 minutes of SAM, then in those 6 lakh at a 50% efficiency, you will actually produce only 15,000 garments in a month. Now, if you were to change this, and instead of 40 minutes, you are producing a 10-minute garment, and if the efficiency remains same at 50% in this scenario, you would produce how many number of garments? 60,000 pieces. If the average FOB is US dollar is 10, the total turnover of company is about 150,000 US dollar, and which is, I've taken at 50 here, it's not 50, but it's about 75 lakhs. So that's a representative case figure, primarily with the focus to make an understanding on how the key numbers are. And as we go forward, we will see what change will come if the efficiencies change, for example. Now, out of this, again, a representative thing. For example, there is a wage of, we are saying the total turnover here was 75 lakhs, right? Now, in the 75 lakhs, we are saying the wages, some 13 lakhs 50,000. Overtime was about 150,000. So very good factory, not too much of overtime here, 1,50,000 per month. Overheads of 9 lakhs. And raw material costs of maybe about 45 lakhs. So total expenses that went into it. And now it doesn't represent the entire expenses, but again, illustratively, to give an example. For example, it doesn't have financial costs, it doesn't have depreciation, it doesn't have a whole lot of other things that goes typically into the P&L. But to give an example, the total expenses here is 69 lakhs. And all of that put together would in any case come to some one head of one figure. Now, which means that in the previous slide, we saw the total sales was 75 lakhs, and here we saw the total expenses 69 lakhs, and the total profit is nothing but your revenue, your sales minus your expenses, which is 6 lakhs, which is 8% here. Now, if you look at the example based on the 3 slides that we have discussed so far, and try and see on how efficiency becomes a key matrix. Now, there are 3 examples here on the same numbers. The first number is 75 lakhs. The efficiency is 50%. You produce 15,000 pieces. This is on the same SAM, 40-minute SAM garment. You have produced 15,000 pieces. Now, if your efficiency is only 40%, you would produce only 12,000 pieces. And if your efficiency is 55%, you would produce 16,500 pieces. Now, the change in efficiency, you are producing either less or more, which will eventually give you either a higher turnover or a lower turnover. So for example, in 50%, your turnover top line is 75 lakhs, 40% is 60 lakhs, and 55% is 82 lakhs 50,000. So that's a key differentiation factor which an efficiency can play to the top line levels. Now, keeping all the other expenses at an X level, we have kept overtime at the same level. We have kept other expenses at, slightly differentiated level, because if you're working at 40%, maybe, you don't have as many expenses. The profit here is 6 lakhs. Profit at 40% is 0, and at 55% is 9 lakhs. So broad representation on how efficiency can be a key determining factor in focusing or in basically your overall top line of the business. Now, as we go forward, the next slide, we've presented overtime as a killer. Now, what is overtime? Now, with all other factors remaining same, if we were to increase overtime, for example, the factory who's producing at 40%, if we increase the overtime from 1,50,000 rupees to 5 lakh rupees, how does that make a change? It actually goes down. From a zero profit, it goes to a negative profit. The other things remaining common, it actually shows a negative profit of 3,50,000, which means a loss of 3,50,000. Right? So again, why we are showing this is basically to improve the overall, to make you assess that these are certain key matrices of the business, and any change in these matrices, positive, negative, can have a drastic impact on your overall business performance. Eventually, for a promoter, what is important is that the business makes a profit or not. From a merchandising perspective, we keep saying that we do a lot of work, there is a lot of effort goes into it, but yet the owner keeps coming and saying that, listen, business is not making money. So where is all the effort going? Right? So the effort is going either by certain systems which are not in sync, that is not making you reach a good level of efficiency in the factory, vis-a-vis also making you lead higher overtimes, or the entire gamut of supply chain. So it's basically to bring into effect some of those thoughts. Now there's another example where we put in air freight and other losses, and like we've seen in the previous example, as you add some of these expenses, your profit goes down even lower. So on the same cases, what we have done now is we've added air freights that, and this poor factory example too, we've done all kind of possible things on this. We have added, they were already at a negative of 3,50,000, and air freights we have added of $1,50,000, and short shipments of $120,000, or whatever, 1,20,000, and left out material of 90,000, and the loss has gone up by 7,10,000. Right? So again, very representative, very illustrative, no real-time scenario, but this is what happens in most of our factories. We don't even know where we keep losing our money while we keep thinking that we are doing great. So I think the important reflection of some of these slides which have been presented here should come from the fact that unless we start measuring how we are losing money in a particular organization, we will not be able to make as much money as we thought we would at the time of booking an order. And that's an important realization that should come through. And obviously, as we go forward, we have some more slides in terms of making the merchandiser, how do you relate it to a merchandiser responsibility? And while I'll again say that it's not in your core responsibility, it's not a merchandiser's core responsibility to keep looking at what your efficiency is and all of that. But if you're not driving these efficiencies, if you're not ensuring that your fabric trims are on time, for example, and if you're not continuously driving the business to ensure that they get into better systems and practices of, whatever industrial engineering approach, of SAM-based management, of capacity planning, which is more time-based, and capacity allocation, which is time-based. He talked about TNAs in the previous session. We talked about some of Leans and Six Sigmas or whatever. And, I also agree on what was discussed in last session, that Lean Six Sigmas come at a very later stage. We should get our basics right first. And some of these costs, which goes and just gets lost in the overall business, should be measured and captured and improved. Now, if this gets improved, the businesses start getting more profitable. And this is a vicious cycle. I mean, we talk of low efficiency, we talk of high overtime, we talk of unhappy customer, we talk of, air shipments, we talk of rejections. And, all of this keeps adding to the anxiety of the merchandisers at any given point of time is what I would say, because everything going well, all of a sudden you get a call, shipment is not being offered today, now shipment will not go, you will miss your forwarder's timeline, and it'll probably have to be replanned on the next vessel or whatever, XYZ. So that's all anxiety. And that's all adds to the mind space of the merchandiser. So why should that happen at the first place? So if you have adequate systems and processes and controls at various levels of supply chain, some of these should be completely avoided. Now, three major killers that we saw in some of the previous slides. First is your efficiency. Second is your overtime. And third is your rejections. Now, there are a lot of other killers in the organization, but we have taken only three. Now, what can be some of the other killers in the organization? They could be having excess manpower, not having adequate machinery, could be, maybe the overall discipline of the factory, or there could be numerous other killers. But I think the three largest killers that we should look at or focus is first on the efficiency, second on the overtime, and third on the rejections. Rejections, because it's not only the CM which is going, it's also the product cost which is going. So that's a fairly large area. Efficiency, because if you work on a better efficiency, you tend to produce more revenue for the organization. And overtime, should be done or planned only if very, very necessary. I mean, for us, it becomes, we don't even, in most factories, you don't even think twice before saying to your production manager that let's do overtime for the whole factory. I mean, and I'm sure 90% of the production managers don't even realize the amount of cost or the impact of cost that would have on the overall business. And then there are team attrition, absenteeism, training, planning, which are all also very important. And some of these also get linked to the three key symptoms. Now, these are symptoms, and the underlying causes can be wherever, whatever, team attrition, absenteeism, training, poor planning. Now we come to role of industrial engineering. How does industrial engineering as a core area get important for us? And merchandisers should definitely be aware of, should be able to understand some of the key principles of industrial engineering. Maybe not apply it completely, but as long as you're aware and how and what part of this can be applied onto the merchandising function is what we have tried to bring in here. Now, industrial engineering is typically defined as an approach which is applied to all factors, including human factor, involved in production, distribution, product, services, very generic definition. It's basically a very logical way to find out what is the best way to do something, what is the time required to do it, and what is the way to measure the results. So if I have to go from where I am standing to the exit, the best way of doing it is that I fly from here to there. I can't do that, so I'll have to walk steps. I can either walk from here to there, I can walk from there to there, I can walk from here to here, or maybe, jump some desks. So, but what is the best way to do that, and what is the most logical way to do that is something which an industrial engineer will be able to apply his basic approach and figure out. And that's what industrial engineering says. The time required to do it, what is the time required to do a particular process, the best way to measure the results, which primarily results in work simplification, increased productivity, increased profits, increased earning to the employees. So scope of industrial engineering, while traditionally and typically it has always been more in the plant and the line layout, in terms of production flow systems, in terms of manpower planning, in terms of machines, attachments, operator performance, operator training, production control systems. And all of these are actually in the scope of industrial engineering. The two fundamental things which an industrial engineer would do is do a method study and a time study. And a method study is typically first comes the method, then comes the time. So unless you decide on a particular method, you can't decide on the time. So that these are two core fundamental parts of industrial engineering. First is method study, and then the second is time study. In the method study, you simplify the task or eliminate it, engineer the operation, reduce the inherent work content, taking account of the skill required to perform a particular skill set or a task. And time study is once you have defined the method, or once you have defined the method, you measure the work content in the task, how long should it take to be trained for a trained and motivated standard operator to perform the task. Now, some of the typical approaches, now industrial engineering as a topic is something which can be discussed maybe for 6 months together. You have engineering courses on industrial engineering which runs into 4 years. We've just summarized it in 3-4 slides because that's what was required here. Now, some of the typical approaches an industrial engineer could use would be on work simplification was, maybe the first picture is a label holder and label holder right next to the machine. Now, if you're using a label holder, you're using only a smaller motion rather than a heavier motion, and it's a more repetitive and rhythmic motion. So you are normally able to reduce time by using rhythmic motions. The second one is a pocket holder, which is again placed very next to the machine. So rather than an operator searching from where he has to pick pockets, there's a pocket holder right next to it, and you're able to reduce time. There are some work aids. For example, what we have on the picture 3 is the side extension table. So wherever you need an additional piece to be kept here, or you need a higher work table available to you, rather than keeping here and there, it becomes more comfortable for the operator. Then we have the bin right next to the machine, where you're basically running off. So it's a straight seam and a continuous seam being run off in a basket which is right next to the machine. And then the pickup becomes far more easier. What we have in the picture, the middle picture below, is a sloping table. Now, a sloping table, for example, is placed on the side of the operator, and it actually helps you use a waterfall principle. A waterfall principle is something where the pieces go down, like this, and because they are clamped on the top, and by using a waterfall principle, your overall handling of the goods becomes far more easier. Now, what we have in the last picture is, for example, a front extension table, and a front extension table normally helps and improve the length of the burst. Now, as an operator, if I'm sitting on a sewing machine and I'm doing a particular operation, it's only X amount of burst I can take, because the distance from the needle to the end of the table is about 8 inches or 9 inches. So I get limited by those 8 to 9 inches, and then I have to regrasp, reposition, and then stitch it again. Now, the moment I have a front extension, I get a better area to work on, and my number of bursts reduces. If my number of bursts reduces, my time reduces, and I can produce more in the same amount of time. So, these are typical examples that we have put here that can be used for industrial engineering on the shop floor. Now, this is an operation bulletin. Now, operation bulletin is typically a apparel engineer's tool, which basically talks about what are the various operations that goes into a particular garment, what is the SAM of a particular garment, what is the actual time required on a certain efficiency, what are the machines and work aids required, the operator calculation, machine calculation, and whatever aids are required on the particular machine. Now, while this is a very technical document, what's important for a merchandiser to capture in this is what is the SAM. Because the total SAM of each operation, when clubbed together, total together, gives you the SAM of the operation, SAM of the garment. And that SAM of the garment becomes extremely important, because there are various things that can be, as we have done earlier, that if it's a 40-minute garment, in maybe a 6 lakh minute available, you can produce as X number of pieces. So if you know the time of each and every garment, you can actually predict at this level of efficiency, we'll be able to produce so many pieces per day. Now, most of our calculations are very ad hoc and random and goes by experience that, if it's a shirt, तो 400 piece तो दिन का बना ही लेंगे, and if it's a pant, तो 300 piece तो दिन का बन ही जाएगा. But if we were to take it on a time basis, then we can predict more accurately on what is the kind of capacity we are looking at, or how much can we actually produce. So that's the relevant of the OB. And now, in most evolved factories and evolved businesses where you have an established industrial engineering department, there is no style that does not get fed on an operation bulletin as soon as it comes in. Even before the style is being confirmed by the customer, at the sampling stage, you have the OBs done. So you know that what costing you have to give, because when you talk of SAM, you also talk of cost per minute, and we'll come to those in the next couple of slides on how you can derive the cost per minute based on your overall cost of the factory. But SAMs typically becomes the main functional point for any style or any garment that we have to manufacture in apparel business. Now, as a continuation to the operation bulletin, what a typical industrial engineer would do would lay out a line based on the operation bulletin, the number of operators and number of helpers required in a particular line. Also on the balancing of a particular line, on theoretical balancing of the line. Now we've defined the term efficiency here for the sake, and we opted to do it later after we have discussed efficiency to in certain cases. Efficiency typically is output by input, and when we say output by input, what is the output in the apparel business? When we have to say output versus input on the same denominator to capture the efficiency, the output in the apparel business is basically the time that you have produced. Which means, for example, if for a particular style, say a men's shirt where you have a SAM, which is a SAM of normally about 18 minutes, if you have produced, or let's take it 20 for ease of calculation, if you have produced say 1,000 pieces, so your total output is actually the minutes that you have produced. So for 1,000 pieces, you produce 1,000 into 20, which is 20,000 minutes is what you have produced. And what is your input? Your input is the number of people that have gone in and the number of hours they have worked. So for example, to produce those 1,000 pieces, if you have used maybe about 40 people, and 40 people have worked maybe about, again for ease of calculation, or let's take it 8 hours. So if 40 people have worked 8 hours, so 40 into 8 is 320 into 60. So that's about 19,200. So this looks like very efficient factory. This is almost 100%. Because you have produced 20,000 and the minutes available were 19,200. So, I mean, typically if in a factory, if we see the average efficiency of an Indian factory today is not more than 32%, 32 to 35%. And that's a study, and that's something which we had seen over various factories that we've studied. So, I think there's a fair amount of improvement that can happen in the efficiency there. But again, to go back on the base definition, efficiency output by input, and when we say output, output is your time produced and input is your time that has gone in. Now SAMS produces output into the SAM value and input is the number of workers into the minutes worked. Now output for a manufacturing unit is calculated as the number of SAMs generated. For example, if style 1, the output is 1,250 pieces, SAM is 10 minutes, so total SAM produces 12,500. Style 2's output is 600, SAM is 7.5, total SAM produces 4,500. So the total SAMs produced in this factory is 22,812.5 minutes. So whatever styles you have done can be totaled. Now input is calculated as number of resources. So for factory 1, for example, again there are two cases here. You have 45 workers, you have 8 helpers, and factory 2 has 50 operators and 6 helpers. Total for 53 in factory 1, 56 in factory 2. Working time 9 and 8. So total working time 540 minutes and 480 minutes. Total clock time available is 28,620 and 26,880. And if you look at the output which we calculated in the previous thing, which is 22,812, and the minutes available here, 28,620 and 26,880, your actual efficiency in case 1 is 79.71 and case 2 is 84.87. So similarly, line efficiencies can also be calculated. In this case, the total available hours are calculated, and this includes the hours worked by operators and the helpers in the line. And combining the efficiencies of all the lines in the factory, you get the factory efficiency. Now, this is again an illustrative example which we thought we will do as a case with you, but I don't, we were told that you're not carrying so many calculators, so it will be difficult to do. But, again, a very simple thing, 20 minutes, 60 operators, 15 helpers, total time available is so much. SAMs produced is 24,000 and 15,000. Line efficiency we've calculated here, and so the total factory efficiency is about 52% here. Got it.
We are at the last stage of the presentation. I know we are running out of time. I'll just quickly go over it. This is an interesting arena for you guys. Role of product costing. Now, what we're going to talk in role of product costing is vis-a-vis what you have been doing is, I would take it as a traditional way of doing the costing. Now, looking forward, what should be our role, or what should be our approach to do the product costing? Now, before we go into that, we need to analyze certain things, which is how is the current costing structures? What does CM cost comprise of? Can anyone tell me what does the CM cost comprise of? CM cost in a factory, in a manufacturing factory, what does it comprise of? The components. The CM cost. No, it is not cost per SAM. Cut.
No, that's right. It is cutting, swing in this, but I think in the CM, the first thing is your salaries and wages. That is one of the components. So can we think of other components? Rentals probably. Yeah.
Okay, we'll come to that. How does industrial engineering, what we have been speaking in the last few slides, will play in, what role does it play in product costing? How does factory efficiency affects product costing? What is the role of order quantities on your product costing, and how do we go applying all these factors in while we do the product costing? Now, looking at the product cost, there are 4 components. One is the fabric cost, which is your shell and the fusing. The other one is your accessory and trim cost. Then it comes the production cost, and that the first component that comes is the CM, the cut and make, the print, the embroidery or any value addition that is done, any special type of finishing or washing is required, that comes in the product costing, production costing. And in your other cost that covers is your markups and the overheads. Now, how do we calculate the CM cost? Is the SAM of the garment into the cost per SAM. SAM of the garment, as Amit had discussed with you all, how do we calculate the SAM of the garment? And it is multiplied with the component called cost per SAM. Now, in the factory cost, there are primarily two main costs. One is the operational cost and one is the indirect operational cost. So 2 costs, one is your direct operational cost and the other one is your indirect operational cost. Now, in your direct operational cost, what are these? What it includes? It includes the wage and salaries of operators, helpers, line supervisors, production managers, and all other related staffs. It includes incentive that has been given out. It includes all the power and the gas supplies. It includes the spare, the store, stationery, chemical, and the transportation. So this all comes into your operational cost. Now, what goes into your indirect cost? Indirect cost, it's basically the number of operational machines, the turnover. It covers indirect salaries, administration costs, financial costs, which is term loan and interest, and depreciation and insurance. So your indirect operational cost covers these areas. Now, cost incurred by producing any number of SAMs are normally fixed on a salary-based system. Thus, the more you produce the SAM, you will have a less cost per SAM. That means if your SAM increases, your produced SAM increases, produced minutes in the factory increases, your cost per SAM value will come down. So number of SAM that is produced are basically determined by the efficiency level of your factory. So now if you can link it back from where we were coming from, that we first discussed about what is the need of being a factory efficient. When we say a factory being efficient, what are the factors that is involved? That is the calculation of SAM, calculation of produced minutes. And from there, we are coming to this perspective of product costing. Because ultimately, what you pitch at your buyer gets you the business. And if you are pitching right, then you will definitely get your business. So your pitching has to be not on the traditional way of asking your line supervisor or the production manager ki kitna piece banega, rather than calculating on the base of the data that is available or that can be generated at the factory level, which will help you to understand what the factory is at present level, and on based of that you can do a product costing. Now we have taken an example. I'll just quickly take you over this example. We have taken 2 export houses and we have taken different products where we have looked at different outputs with different SAMs, because each product will have a different SAM with a different with the operator and helper and a working time. What we calculate out of here is that what is the efficiency level of these 2 factories. Now factory A, that is the ABC factory, is at efficiency level of 46%, and XYZ is at 50%. Now we look at the cost of these factories. Now ABC has certain costs, which is salary, wages, incentives, spares, stores, stationery, which sum up to 12,32,400. Their SAM produced per day is 25,250, which has been taken from the previous slide. And the SAM produced per month is 6,06,000, so that the cost per SAM becomes 2 rupees, 2.03. Whereas factory XYZ has a cost per SAM 1.56. Now, along with this operational cost, when we add the indirect operational cost, where we add the cost for term loan, administration cost, depreciation, the total cost per SAM, which is the factory's actual cost per SAM for factory ABC is 3.52, and for factory XYZ is 4.04. This is absolutely a representative, illustrative figure kept here to make you understand that how we are linking the cost per SAM to your product costing, how important it is, and how important it is to understand efficiencies and other factors. Now, if you look at this chart, it has all the cost on one hand, where semi-variable cost, fixed cost, depreciation, and it also has the SAM produce and the average running machine. So if you see the average, the 10th row, average floor efficiency from a month-on-month basis, from a 39.18, it varies to 58.90. Your cost per SAM also varies out. From a 0.08, it goes down to 0.05. So your factory becomes, you are more competitive, you are more cost competitive factory if your efficiencies goes up. If your operational efficiencies goes up, you become more cost competitive factory. Now,
also, I think when we talk of cost per SAM, or when we've spoken of cost per SAM, it's also important to understand what are the typical indices of cost per SAM in some of the countries. India, for example, typically works on anywhere between 5 to 6 cents. Better factories in India work on 5 cents. Worse factories in India also work on 10 cents. Now, look at the difference. Average factory in Bangladesh today works on a cost per minute of, cost per minute, when I'm saying cost per minute, it's cost per minute produced of around 3 to 4 cents. Now, a 3 to 4 cents compared to a good factory in India working at 5 cents is still lower. An average factory in Sri Lanka, yeah.
Clubbing all these factors into SAM, because as an engineer, or when you're standardizing for purchasing and cost, you look at standard amount of minutes required to make that product, direct labor. We're not trying to club all these things and confuse the whole issue, because that's really not, you know what, if you're not efficient and you hire cousins and brothers and uncles and put them on the salary, that's going to affect your cost of SAM, the way you cost it. So I really need to know, by the way, I'm going to have to share with your audience a figure, cost per minute in each country, developed as well as developing countries, exporting countries. That's my major consulting firm out of the United States. So if you're even under, you can forward that out to the other people.
Yeah,
you
sure.
Understand. At the same time, the efficiencies of each country. So it really gives a very good indicator to the buyer, sourcing people, where do they want to place the goods. It's not just purchasing fabric in one country and then placing in the other country. Maybe logistics play a major role for them. They have to look at landed duty paid costs, not just look at SAMs and the evaluation in there. So I'm confused with your presentation.
No, I think what we're trying to say here is actually deriving the same fact which you are referring to. that the cost per minute or the cost per SAM is extremely important. Now, what happens in today's scenario here, what we have seen in most factories who do not even have an industrial engineering concept, who do not even have, the kind of complete systems based on time, it becomes very difficult for them to even capture and understand the importance on how that time can be used in some of the processes. So that's something which we've tried to bring it forward by various examples that we have quoted. And eventually, it's about the cost per SAM, it's about profitability for a business, and that's what you are also referring to. Now, sourcing, I'll just complete this. Now, sourcing decision is one part of it, and there are various indices that are given by various consulting companies on sourcing indices. Kurt Sullivan, who's our partner and an associate, also gives it every year on year, not just about price index, but efficiency index, but logistics index, and all of those things covered together. But I think more important for India is, one, to understand today that while we keep thinking that we are doing great and we are doing a good job, there are a lot of other things which are which make the business go away in somebody else's hand. So, but the basic premise is your cost per minute, and as long as you are in control of your cost per minute, and you have an understanding of your cost per minute at the first place, and you're in control of your cost per minute that you're producing in the factory, that's important. Please.
My humble opinion is, rather than confusing the issue, SAM, standard allowed minutes, it should be just measured standard allowed minutes, not helper. How do you cost the minute value of a helper in an order? How do you cost that?
See, we've not even gone into that depth at all in terms of having operators or helpers, and don't even want to do that with these set of people, because it's a very, very elaborate field. I said there are 4 years of education of industrial engineering. Now, if you have...
People think they are industrial engineers now.
No, I don't even want, that was never the idea. Idea was never that. We don't want to make these industrial engineers. The idea, and I think I've been able to say it very clearly, that the idea was that people should start relating themselves to some of the practices of industrial engineering, and that's why we have brought these things here. Idea was not to train on industrial engineering at any given point of time, but they have to be the drivers. They're not going to be responsible for this, but they have to drive some of these things into the system at various places of supply chain, and that was the whole perspective.
Excuse, since the way you are running out of time, let the speakers finish the presentation first. Okay, you have 1 more minute.
Yeah. Yeah, I was basically saying that if you look at the cost per SAM in Bangladesh, that's close to about 3 to 4 cents. In India, it's anywhere between 5 cents upwards, and I've seen factories working at 10 cents, 12 cents also, which is, which basically gets derived from the efficiencies they're working at. If you look at Pakistan today, it's close to about 7 to 8 cents, and good factories again work at 6 cents, but so, that's something which becomes a very base scenario for somebody who has to place orders between 2-3 different countries on what kind of orders that go. But from our perspective, I would say that we should approach it that this is the potential for us to improve. So if you were to improve to that level, I would say it will be euphoric that we say that we get to a level of 3 to 4 cents, but maybe in certain product lines it's possible. For example, I've seen a fantastic factory, Indian factory, making men's underwears, and if you compare the efficiency of that factory vis-a-vis average factory, maybe in Bangladesh or probably also in Taiwan, it's very comparative in terms of efficiency. Now the only issue is that the labor cost here was higher than a factory there. So that's where the cost, overall cost gets a little diluted. But efficiencies can still play a very important part. So that's something which we wanted to highlight. So I think in terms of summarizing the entire thing, the things that we have discussed today in the last about an hour or so, one, the focus on design and product development, which is something which is exemplary and which is something which nobody can move out of today. And I think we've discussed that enough, and we've had various presentations. Venu of Marks and Spencer was there in one of our recent workshops, and he could only, strive little to explain the importance of design and development. And I think they are, MNS, for example, is kind of working with all of their suppliers to ensure that there is a lot of focus on design and product development. Bjorn of H&M, who was the earlier country head of H&M, has been speaking on the need of design development and how they want their suppliers to start focusing and giving them product designs. So I think the retailers overall, they have a certain cost attached to design and product development. And while there is so much requirement, how will they fulfill that if it doesn't come from the suppliers? So that perspective of design and product development becomes extremely important. Second is on the new product development can also help you or help businesses get to better product development in terms of increasing the product base or getting onto the new markets, for example. Third thing which we discussed was a cost per SAM based approach to costing. Fourth is a scientific approach, a SAM based approach towards planning and overall monitoring of the processes, and a very process improvement function with continuous improvement teams. So if we look at a short to medium term plan, moving towards industrial engineering based approach for calculating CM costs, asking for operation bulletins and related SAM value for each style from industrial engineers, looking at establishing an in-house product engineering cell that work towards product engineering to reduce the work content. And a medium to long term plan would be to start costing all styles on cost per SAM basis, start working with dedicated suppliers as partners to assist in improvement of overall internal efficiency levels and reduce overall cost structures, and apply concepts of lean manufacturing, Six Sigmas, and product engineering to achieve lower conversion costs. That's what we have for today.
Thank you for a good and informative presentation. Since we are running out of time, I will allow one question to be asked.
In fact, I came a bit late, so I was not fully, but what I was listening to you about the CM. If I go by the calculation where the 5 cents which you say from the good Indian factories are achieving, the 5 cents is per minute.
Yeah, per minute produced.
Per minute produced. If I go by 8-hour shift, it comes to roughly 1,200 rupees per day.
Okay.
And it's per machine.
Per minute.
No, I have taken 8 hours.
Okay.
5 cents per minute.
Okay.
480 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You see, traditionally, when most of the companies they are going to do the costing internally, people take from 400 to probably 800 or 900 rupees per day per machine cost. One in class probably takes 800, what I've heard of them, I take 400 rupees. And I am almost outpriced the moment I go at 400 even. And buying houses these days have a tendency of for open sourcing. And they have a format that was probably designed for China or Hong Kong. And it comes to everybody. And the moment they see this CM, I calculate like if I make 10 pieces of this style, my industrial engineer says you can make 10 pieces in a dark shift. So my per piece cost comes to, I divide for 400 rupees at that, 40 rupees. As I told you, I'm outpriced, and the buying house immediately asks me, what is this? For them, it's a tailor cost. CM means tailor cost. Just what a tailor could charge, not the line supervisor, line QC, the floor manager, LCD cost, that floor, everything. So how you justify in Indian context this kind of 1,200 rupees?
See, I think that
we are then not pricing our product rightly.
No, I think there are two levels of working here. First, when we say that, buying offices don't cost correctly, I agree that a lot of time buying offices also don't cost correctly. In one of the recent workshops which we have done on merchandising and costing with one of the large European retailers in India, there were a lot of these things which came up. The understanding of industrial engineering and buying offices, in factories it's still there to an extent, in buying offices it's virtually not there at all. So I think that's a process of learning where people have to go through and understand what, the entire thing has to happen. But the more scientific thing is to also, while you are saying that your industrial engineer says that you can produce 10 pieces per hour or 10 pieces per machine for a particular product, is that the benchmark is he talking about? Or at what level of efficiency is he talking about? I also said that most Indian factories, what we have studied, don't work more than 35% of efficiency.
Industry engineers traditionally, from their education, what they have learned, they have different tools to calculate the SAM, and they come up with that. And for Indian context, they bring it to 60%.
No, but that should not be done. No, why should you do that? See, to me, I would never do that because the entire focus should be that if on a 100% SAM, my efficiency comes to 32%, I at least know that there is an improvement potential to 50%. If by reducing the SAM down by 60%, I am just taking it as a feel-good factor that I am working at a 45-50% while I'm actually working at a 30-32%.
I'll call it a reality check, because once you tell the 100% to your production manager, probably he'll throw that industry engineer out from
I don't think so. I think we've applied this in a lot of factories in the country, and not just in the country, outside the country. And if told properly and educated properly, I think a reality check would still be that you are working at a 32-35% rather than a 40-45%. And production manager should know on, what is the potential of improvement. It's not that what he's doing is wrong or right, but to understand the process and to understand how you can improve the process, that is the key.
So this 5 cents which you got, you had a survey of the industry?
Yeah. We have studied various. One, we have taken the people who are listed and taken their cost and their understanding and come on to that level. 2, on wherever we have worked in terms of setting up new businesses, we've done business plans for them, and based on that, we have come up with this.
And this includes the cost of that production floor, not the material, salary, and other things that goes into this.
No, this is largely operational cost.
Largely operational.
Yeah, largely operational costs.